Okay, good morning, Professor Lee, and colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, students. It's my great pleasure to host this peer seminar. My name is Qing Yan Chen, the Director of Purdue Academy for Interdisciplinary Research. It's really a great honor for me to introduce our speaker, Professor JIN Ying from the University of Cambridge. He is well known for his work on the computer simulation models of the cities and urban change. His research explores how technology, public policy, and human behavior interact to shape the urban growth and infrastructure, and how these insights can inform innovative urban solutions. So this is really an interdisciplinary solution. He himself is an expert in these multidisciplinary areas. So in the past, Professor Jin has been serving as the head of the Martin Center for Architectural and Urban Studies, which pursues interdisciplinary, collaborative, and international research spanning transportation and buildings, sustainability, digital media design, risk assessment in built environment, and territorial conflict in divided cities. So with his expertise, Professor Ying also contributes extensively through public service. He serves as a commissioner for the UK Independent Transport Commission and advises various government departments on the national policy relating to the environment, rural affairs, and air quality. So during the pandemic, he took part in the Loyal Society's initiative providing rapid high-quality modeling to support the UK government's COVID-19 policy decisions. He led the Cambridge work on urban analytics and small space modeling, developing a new methodology for capturing commuting patterns in greater detail and linking them to COVID-19 incident. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our seminar speaker, Professor JIN Ying.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Right. Really pleased to see colleagues from so many different fields. And this particular topic, I would like to really engage with a wide group of people because as you will see, this is something the colleagues here may already variously considered, but we all need to work together in the next perhaps 20 years to achieve what we think will be good for the future of humanity. I'll tell you why it's 20 years and why it's so precise, right? First of all, to explain the topic, improving longevity as a gerund, as a kind of action, is all people want. And in fact, as a kind of outcome, this has also actually been quite true because people have been living longer. The question is whether people consider this as a good news or bad news, right? So this is where we begin. If you look at the median age by country, this is really the middle age of the whole age span from 0 to possibly the highest will be about 119 or something like that at the moment, right? And if you look at the median age, you will see that countries, this one, across the world have exhibited very different characteristics, right? And here I noted the median age. Because this cursor is good. is 31 years. And which country is at this median? And it's India. So this color here, this kind of a greenish color is the color of the middle. Anything that is darker has a higher median age, right? And I have the numbers actually written down because I need to talk about it. But in fact, I don't have to because I just remembered my next slide actually shows how this actually goes over time. So this is a 1960. This is too small for you to see. This the very left-hand side. So this is where the number is, right? And here is roughly now, this is 2024, because with this data, we haven't actually integrated this yet. And I'm using a graph from Wikicommons because it's such a beautiful graph. You can see that for median age by country, this actually has been increasing for both rich and poor countries, right? And here. And then if you notice, East Asian countries, and you can see from this list, have been rising really fast, right? The steepest rise from here, you can see, is this gray line, which is here, of South Korea, right? And this is both the effect of people living longer, and also there are fewer children at the lower end. And so what I'm saying here is that this is likely to be quite a complex story because a simple graph like that tell me the median age of the country, which would be actually quite a kind of simple question. But then if you look at this, and you can see that the different numbers actually come from different influences, right? And China as well actually has been rising quite fast, although there is a divergence between the two, right? Or maybe I've got this a little stuck. Okay, thank you. Yeah, so let me just go back for just one moment to give you some of the actual numbers. For example, Japan is quite dark here, as dark as Germany and Italy here, right? And this is 50. US is 40. And China is 42. Shanghai is 40. And Shenzhen is 32.5. Now, with this audience, you're going to ask me, what is the one for Hong Kong, right? Hong Kong is 47.4. Right, so it's quite precise. For 2026, this is these are all statisticians' work looking at this, but it's useful to have these numbers. So, in terms of Hong Kong, that's been really a great achievement of people reaching one of the highest life expectancies in the world as a world region, right? And also, possibly, there's also another story of perhaps fewer children born at the moment, and these two are going to be the kind of stories that are going to develop in my lecture. Along with that, you may also ask why Shenzhen also has got fewer children born at this moment, and why that is younger. That is because there's a lot of young people, graduates, actually, who emerge in Shenzhen to work. And that's the story in the middle. So the story actually has got three parts. So that's longevity at the higher end of the elderly, the the lower end of the number of children, and also the distribution of the young adults actually who just started their career. And this is where it's very relevant to the whole idea of cities, right? Okay, I've spent longer enough so that you look at these, and then you'll say, okay, there must be more of this story, right? So, and now here we're looking at the life expectancy. This is the number of years that the people expected to live, right, if they're born this year. And you can see, on the whole, is a great story in terms of the humanity. And in total, on average, the number of people in the country, in the whole world, in this particular graph, right, so now I'm getting hung of doing it, or I think I have, but let me just show you here. And here, basically, 73.8 is a new record. So the whole world has not really seen a number as big as this in the past. And the females are doing even better because they look after themselves better, perhaps. And because as a male, I need to learn some lessons from this. And if you then look at how these are distributed across the world, you will see one thing is that this thing has a very imperfect correlation with the income of the country. For example, let's just look at United States and China are both in this category. In fact, China probably has now proceeded a bit ahead, certainly in the new 15th five-year plan. The idea is actually to increase this. Perhaps for each five-year plan period, you increase by 1 year for the whole country, which is an enormous achievement, right? And then you can see that some of the countries in North Africa also are in this category, right? In fact, this one is slightly unfair because the US actually has been, in terms of life expectancies, has been much lower than the other of the G7 at this moment, right? And what actually the facts are that in the 10 years before COVID, after COVID, the story actually became a little complex, but actually we have recovered this, as you see from the overall graph earlier. And over that 10 years, 202 countries out of 210 countries, right, saw life expectancies rise. And yeah, so I've made that point about the rich and poor countries. So this is not just about actually how much money one earns. Then a further measure, which is very useful and important, is the measure of life expectancy from the best practice countries. So this is really like a competition in the world to find out from these countries. And because we're going back to the 1850s, and you look at the countries with the highest industrialization at that moment, right? And then you can have Sweden, right? And then you can have Japan, and you can have Germany, France, England, Wales, all muchness there, right? So, and basically the slope in over that period of 150 years was that every year the slope will increase by 0.24, which means that every 4 years there will be an increase of 1 year of life expectancy among the countries who achieve the best of this number, right? And then you can also look at the males and females, and also the number of for those actually who are really inclined, actually looking at the numbers. I'm pretty sure that lots of the colleagues here actually will look at actually where's the x-axis, which is years, which is y. Y is number of years again to live on average on Earth, right? And here is for all the population from 0. And here's from the year 65 years old and how many years additional there are. And then these curves, they are showing a great achievement, basically, right? And here I want to give the first spoiler, which is to say that if you look at these countries, Australia, Denmark, Iceland, Japan, Norway, and Switzerland for the period now, right? And in the last 100 years. And these are the countries who have generally been very careful about planning and do design the cities reasonably well, right? And especially Denmark, for example, right? And so that is, and this is at the top, as you can see the red dot. Of course, life expectancy in the past, let's say in the Stone Age, would say actually maybe 30, is not because everybody would just live to 30 and then die. In Stone Age, actually, there's quite a lot of bones you will find that from quite old people. The issue was that the younger people, lots of the infants, actually, they don't tend to live. And this actually happened even from the 1850s, actually the industrial age, Victorian times, actually wasn't very good either. And from 1900, the curve started to go down, right? And the meaning of this is that for now, the story of that push of the 4-year, you add 1 year more of the life expectancy to the average life expectancy of the world. That story has now lost one of the propellers, and which is a good thing because basically for infant mortality, that's no longer such a story. There's a lot of good things that people in Victorian times actually have done. And this is actually what's going to happen. So Chris Jensen, who wrote in Lancet a very good article, and this one, certainly when I distribute this, actually you can look at this. This is a very good article. You should all read. And basically, the story is that people who, the youngest people who are here, who are born, maybe actually the undergraduate students actually of PolyU, they're expected to live well over 100, right? Because this is about half the babies, but this is basically saying median age is going to be like this, right? So this is and where's the top? This is a doctor, and he doesn't want to say because there are new developments that's happening. In fact, sometimes when I get frustrated for lack of progress with the students' work, dissertation, so, and I said to them, your generation is going to live for 1,000 years. You have plenty of time to do this, right? So, and I'm not joking because some of these people, if you catch the medical curve, so that each time you don't have to get all the medical problems solved, you just get the medical problems solved to actually get you actually to live to the next stage, and then you replace some machine parts or whatever, and then you can actually go on, or some people actually can go on for a long, long time. And then people will say, okay, maybe you live very old, but like some of the Greek myths that the Jews actually fulfill the promise of giving somebody longevity, but actually forgot actually the element of usefulness. And then people start to get old and then live very long. Is that good? And that's been the question lots of the people have asked. Now, and again, Chris Jensen's article, which is a meta-study really, basically shows, I don't want you to read all of these numbers, just show that a meta-study looking at a really solid evidence from the earlier years in the 80s onwards until well, and also even the earlier records in this one. So this is actually more or less so list by importance rather than that. And this column, and what you want to see is this negative sign, which is basically saying, as people get older, the onset of their disabilities for moving or for everyday activities, there are 4 pages of this. Basically, they all have got negative signs there to say that that's going to happen later. On the whole, on balance, people are still debating this, but basically, as the length of the time of one's life expect to lengthen, then it probably lengthens equally. So the healthy part lengthens. The bad news is also so that the slightly unhealthy or later quite unhealthy part also start to lengthen. And this is where the worries actually becomes. And this is actually, then you have these gripes actually. And this is something I found actually on my journey here a couple of days ago. Simon Cooper, who tends to actually say something like this to catch attention, basically says the creeping feeling that life is getting too long. And here, interestingly, was complaining about this kind of both the physical and the metaphoric stairs that the old people are going to climb. And also, for those who are now keen to look at this and become really engaged in this effort, I want to show you a warning, because this is going to be a really hard question. This is actually one of the hardest, probably harder than AI, and certainly harder than climate change. Because this is actually part of the story of the climate change, because how people live on this earth is basically is where the climate change is coming from in quite a large part. And during Prime Minister Abe's government in Japan, and Japan is one of the best practice countries, as you saw from the figures before, there was a proactive initiative policy. And maybe this is part of the third arrow, all the difficult things. And the first two was to do with let people borrow a lot of money and invest a lot. And then the third one is structural changes. And this is one of them. And it was called, it was launched as the Council for Design 100-Year Life Society. It's a bit of a mouthful, but I would want to just have a shorter word, but actually this is really long. But anyhow, it done this way, and it shows that they're serious, and some of these people are still around, and Abe, unfortunately, isn't anymore. But even within his government, this thing was abandoned. So, and this is the screenshot I had, and the only link here is called Japanese, and it's not a serious link, and there's no more stories, and this is just the end of it. And in fact, there's one advisor from the UK who actually have written some very good things. But what you see from the writing is that there's a lot of analysis, but there's not enough concrete actions. And when you do the concrete actions, this can be quite controversial, right? And in the discussion part, I'd like to perhaps to interact with the audience here on that as well. And these big changes is not just about one number or maybe two numbers, median age, and median age is the one in the middle. And the life expectancy for each age group, you can actually look at. In fact, you can look at actually how many lives, how many years people live, right? But if you look at the kind of Christmas tree shaped population cohort of 1956 after the war in Germany, which is quite typical, and China and Hong Kong are both going through this. If you can now look up actually from the statistical bureaus or agency, Hong Kong agencies numbers, you will see this. In 2006, there is a bulged middle. And this is actually where Germany flourished, because this bulged middle, lots of people working, they all have a lot of experience, right? And in their 50s, basically, right? So people who are really good and have been trained. In fact, if you look at the statistics, there's a interesting one to say that in the world, people tend to start their business around then. There are more people starting business in between 40 and 50 than between 20 and 30, although the 20 and 30 bits actually get all the attention. But you will see that not only this Christmas tree actually now becomes, I don't know what this is called, a shape, but also the base is now much more narrowed. And those people who are good with numbers, actually they can work out that this story spells some trouble. At the moment, population aging, like this story, is thought to be a gray rhino. Gray rhino being the thing that is slowly coming. And if you delay it for a few years while you're busy with something, that probably is okay. If you delay for 20 years, when all the young people get old, and when they have fewer children, as Germany, you can already see, the whole German population has already dropped in total, even with a million of Syrian refugees actually filled into it, and so on. But it's ignored by most people, and this is where the issues actually might be. And worse still, the macro-economists who actually forecast our GDP generally tend to think that population aging is a terrible story. It has been blamed for falling productivity and output, and a very straightforward story, and people recognize it because I'm now older. I cannot write as many papers. Or actually, I probably teach the same number of lectures, and probably when I feel that when I supervise students, and now I supervise them better, but I don't really increase productivity that much, and I cannot take so many PhD students. And university actually limits, even in Cambridge, to 6 at any time. I have at the moment probably about 12, but still. And then I've been actually asked to look at this number every now and then. But anyhow, there's also rising government debt. And that is because the old people are very good with votes. And then the politicians are scared of them. So each time they will borrow money to placate older generation across the world, especially when the budget is determined this way. And also, lower returns on investment, because when you have people who are graying, and then you say, well, I still invest this company for another 20 years, and then they think about it. And finally, rising inflation, because as the number of young people becomes fewer, there's a labor shortage, right? Which is the big driver. And they have a point. For example, here we have two graphs. One is the share of the health spending by age group. You can see that the people, if you look at the Netherlands, which will be a good curve, and you say, and here, each age group, actually, that's the percentage of the share of the total spending. The older people do spend a lot of money. And there is then on the right a more explosive graph, which was done in 2016, but actually was not repeated even for the OECD, which actually showed that how much this spending relative to per person GDP output. So basically, how much money you earn on average for a citizen, and how much you spend it on medical services. And in fact, in Holland, it's over 60% at this end, right? A lot of complications that you need to deal with. This is part of the service, and it does produce the GDP. But on the other hand, health is usually funded by something else, right? So, because of course you can make drugs, and that's part of the medical sector. But on the other hand, you have to have the money actually to spend actually to use those drugs. So some people ignore, and the macroeconomists don't like it. So are we stuck? And here, for this audience, actually, I added the slides, and after I developed the first set of the slides, basically I went back to see what the older people have been saying, right? So, and the online audience, is that mostly in East Asia or actually across the world? And so for basically for them, those who can read classical Chinese, you can take your own views on what Confucius and Zhuangzi, who is a Taoist, says. But on this right-hand side, I give the summary of the story to say both Confucius and Zhuangzi thought that it was very hard to get along with the old guys, basically. So if you read between the lines. And for Confucius, to provide for the elders, which is most economists are thinking about, and actually most of the health planning for the elders are about, was the least of worries, right? And what he made the point is that the respect is needed. In particular, the young has to respect and the love from the heart. And this is basically what he told the two students, Ziyu and Zixia. And for Zhuangzi, he was much more of a contrarian, and therefore he would always say something different, and always is rebutting Confucius. And what he was saying here is that respect and the filial love are the pretty basic things. So if you want to do it, because he recognized that. But there are also 4 other higher levels. So that's where it is, which is basically saying that, first of all, wouldn't it be better, he argued, that to enable the old elders to be independent from their offsprings, rather than to have the offsprings to waited on them all the time. And we all have this experience, right? So you can only do so long. And then things actually sometimes go wrong if the relationship actually gets very close. The 4th one would be to enable the elders to leave their offsprings alone, even better. So some of the younger people here might think that way. The 5th one is to say, to enable the elders to be more independent from their communities. Actually, it's not much more of a burden. And then also, finally, this is at the Taoist point, to say that everyone should follow the nature's laws, basically. So you just live and die as nature determines. Of course, this is not what we're going to all recognize, because now we have all the science and technology and tools and also morality, and all of these things have gone beyond that. But what is particularly interesting is to say that, especially in these parts, to do with the mutual independence. And so that actually may become a very big issue. So for cities, to provide for elderly care is good, but it's also even better if they could be enabled to work for longer if they want to, and also to be able to live a more independent life actually for much longer, right? Ideally, actually, for most of their lives. And to summarize this first part of the story, the culture change is really needed. And this is really not just about looking after the older citizens, but also about the intergenerational relationships. If you look at today in most cities, the people who are the hardest pressed are not the elderly, because the old system of pensions and so on are set up, and the post-war baby boom actually were able to provide the resources which they still enjoy today. And what is really happening is that the lack of pension provisions actually for the younger generations is the question, is where the question starts, right? And for this, we will, of course, plan economically, technologically, and look at governance structures, all of that. But also, one overlooked angle is a cultural change, particularly in Europe and in the US. In China, this system actually, the underlying cultural traditions actually still are working. And then that is something we should also engage with. And this needs to be engaged, enabled, sorry, by a major shift in the environment we live. So to compare with what actually happened in the past, life expectancies were raised through major improvements in our cities, through clean water, sanitation, medical care, parks, vaccines. That was the story of the probably the period from Victorian times to the end of Second World War. And where should the new major shift now take place? Now, the first thing we need to look at the global parameters. The first thing that you notice is that the population in the 2100s and across the world, according to the UN, which build up from the national forecasts, which all been done quite carefully. Of course, there are some ranges to say there's some uncertainty, but on the whole, there's going to be a global stabilization of the population, which may involve actually some population falls in the developed world, and the milder and milder increases of population growth in the current poorer countries, right? But one thing that is certain is that for both the rich and poor countries, cities are likely to be where most people are going to live. And this is good news. But on the other hand, the issue is that the cities were built in old times, right? And in Europe, actually, from 150 years ago, if not further, where there were fewer elderly people, and the elderly were expected to actually be less active, and they certainly they were actually to be left alone and not working, and therefore the public spaces of these places are generally not designed in this way. Of course, there's a huge effort to retrofit, right? And things like these fitness corners in Hong Kong, they're great things, right? But I would argue that that's only the very start. They're not going to be the things that are enough. Actually, this is only the tip of the iceberg. There's going to be quite a lot of changes, particularly the changes intergenerational in terms of culture, because currently pensioners in the cities that is looking into the past were expected to be off work altogether and to be looked after. And certainly this is not going to be the case anymore. And here, what I want to say, of course, here people will have a lot of experiences, and I want to engage with this during the discussion. So there are a lot of detailed measures we can talk about. But what I like to argue is the angle which is less looked at, which is to do with how strategically we look at this, right? And here is a map of England and Wales with here being London, right? And here being Birmingham, Manchester, Leeds, and Tyneside. These are the big regions. And this is the southwest, Devon, Cornwall, and this part is Wales. And here is what I'm going to ask you to do the impossible to spot these blue places is where the young people are concentrated, right? So I think my colleague here is already spotted the biggest concentration. In fact, that this is an increasing concentration. And why? Because young people, they want actually to find places where they can develop their career, develop their life. These densities are wonderful for that purpose. And particularly if they also connect well with this new technological agenda. And these blue spots are much fewer in these other cities. And here is actually the largest urban area of England, right? So basically from Liverpool, Manchester to Leeds and York and so on. But you don't see as many of those places here. And the UK actually does have an issue of more and more young people are now concentrated into the southeast in general. And here's Cambridge and Oxford, right? And you can see Milton Keynes and all these places are the ones. So basically, this is becoming less balanced, and which accelerates the aging of the Midlands and North, right? So when we do analysis of this, what we look at was that if you assume people will retire and then at the age that we have now, right, which is about 65 for the official national pensions age, then there will not be enough people to work, right? Especially if the population growth is so low, right? So we can look at the different scenarios based on what the UK has done between 53 and 2019. So basically, it's between these levels. And what we had to do, and this is a particular change already implicit, and when I told people, people accept, but people still treat this as something that somebody else should be worried about. And if we assume that the total growth of the workers were equal to the growth of the population, then that would mean that the pensionable age of a university professor like me is going to be in the 70s, right? And not everyone wants to do this, I must say, but I want to do it. So, but there are people who want to do it. You should allow them to do it. And in fact, if you don't allow this to happen, basically the economy is going to collapse. And there are some other issues. This is not much to do with aging. Basically, since the financial crisis, you can see that in terms of UK labor productivity, the output per hour of people actually has barely increased, right? And this blue line just shows the fictitious line that you expect it to grow, like in the 2000s. And again, and here is the picture of the actual GDP trajectory. So COVID, of course, is here, which has a little dip, and this just about to recover, but you can see that it's not on the same trajectory anymore. And then here is where UK will grow like Japan in the gray line, right? Or like United States in the blue line. Neither of them are particularly relevant because the UK is different. But for the last few years, the red bit shows that it's actually been growing more like Japan rather than like the United States. And if you want to achieve this kind of growth, which is important to do, then what you need to do is really to ramp it up in the latter part, maybe in 5 to 10 years, and then when the situation becomes much more adapted and then people can grow again, then that part you need to have a really quite high growth, which is quite difficult to achieve without a major shift in both how we plan the economy and how we actually develop this culture of longevity. And basically, what we want to do is to say we have a low growth, which is 0.5 per year, which is like Japan. High growth, 0.8%, is like United States. And then we also have this gradual recovery, which is basically starting low and then go higher, right? And only in the highest growth, people will ask me, why do you need any growth? Haven't you got enough money in the UK and you don't have to grow? It's not the case. The issue is that if you don't grow, you have to get somebody else's money to fund the people who don't have money. And this is almost impossible to do. Certainly, it's impossible if you really want to improve the lives of people. At the moment, the reason why that London grows so much and the rest of the country grow less is that London, from everywhere in the country, you can get here in 2 hours, even from Aberdeen, right? For Manchester, only barely. Most people cannot. And this is an enormous amount of investment. And not just by high-speed rail, but also by flight, sustainable flights and so. And you can do it. And if you do this for every part, then you can have a support for this gradual recovery. This is what a bad scenario looks like. And basically, if it's a slowly leveling up and then basically very low growth, what will happen is that the southeast, London here, will still be kind of a relatively okay, very mild growth like Japan. And the most parts in the rest of the country will have negative growth. And you see that all these lines tip up because these cities are still growing quite a bit. So that on the whole, they still grow a bit, but actually nobody actually have a comfortable life. And this is a good kind of scenario where the southeast will grow less and then all the rest will catch up. And this is what we want. And the key ingredient in the spatial balance is the distribution of jobs. At the moment, the government is very concerned with housing. They want to build a lot of housing in the north, which is no use. And if you build a housing without the jobs, nobody will be there. Especially the high-skilled jobs, if you want to do it. And finally, the high-skilled jobs will drive more spread of entrepreneurship and wealth and attract young people to the north. And gradually, that will actually improve neighborhood deprivation, particularly in the north. And this is actually what we want to do. To summarize, most people are going to age in cities, and this is generally good news because most of the high-profile people like Winston Churchill or Mrs. Thatcher at that time, actually who could almost actually live anywhere, they finally, when they are in old age in the 80s, they returned to central London to live. Because you get access to everything much easier. This means that we need a big revolution in cities through both physical and cultural change. And this is not feasible for individuals and families acting alone. So to be sensible with your own family is a good thing, but is not. You find it very hard. You actually get into the impossible Confucius scenario, actually, with the offspring actually struggling each year more actually to help their families. Because of the reduction in birth rates, this revolution needs to take place before the current young people, I'm looking at lots of them here, get old. Because these are the people who actually don't have the pensions, and probably they will have to, not now at the moment, right? Not enough provisions. And this is across the whole world. And at the moment, we've barely scratched the surface. So this is the need to happen. And finally, Asian cities age much faster. And thus, this will have a much narrower time window to act. So with this warning, I would like to finish this and then perhaps to discuss with the colleagues. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your very inspiring work. It's a lot of data there to show the effect of aging population, which really create a lot of societal problems. Now, I'd like to open the floor for Q&A. First, I'd like to give the opportunities for the audience here. Yes, please, just you can just sit down and then press the microphone.
It's already on.
Yeah.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes,
Okay.
very well.
And very thank you for your wonderful speech. And I once thought about a solution because in my hometown, the elders also often live concentratedly, meaning that maybe there is one of two neighborhoods that are 90% of them are elders, and if elders concentrate, the young people will tend to move out. And I will propose a prompt that maybe in the future we can build large institutions, just like schools, and to hold the elders, like the elder masons, because there are tens of millions of young ancestors in China mainland, but we don't often see them on the streets because most of them are going into school and spending most of their time in there because they can also sleep overnight in the dormitories. So if we can concentrate the elderly together, can we reduce the problem?
Well, I think here is the test of the question is to see whether you like to do it. Well, because you probably cannot imagine this yet. When I was your age, I couldn't even imagine actually what's going to happen. It would be so terrible when I was 35 or something like that, right? But basically, talk to people and find out. And so I don't really have a black and white answer to this question. So clearly, there are some people, and some of my own fellow students who are now actually entering the retirement age. They're thinking actually of living together, right? And that may be good if they're good friends. But what I would say is that whatever you do, make the life situation diverse, because every day there's new things to do, and that will be good. And I worry that if only old people are together, they're likely to think of less new things. And the question is whether the younger generation will also want to live with them, and that's not a given. So therefore, I think quite a lot, and sometimes when I have my own quarrels with my parents, I read Zhuangzi, because this is actually gives me the kind of insight that one gets actually from this cultural tradition.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good morning, Professor Jin. Oh, you first.
Right. So okay. Yeah. Yeah. So
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Jin.
Yeah.
I know that you have recently proved that in the UK, walking, the transport fashion, like
Yes.
walking and cycling has been
Yes.
proven to be beneficially affecting those from age 38 to 70 years old.
Yes.
For the people, for the mental health. But for the settings in the UK, I mean in London, and compared to Hong Kong, do you have any suggestions in Hong Kong, say for those in the similar age or say in elderly homes in Hong Kong?
Well, Hong Kong has an advantage because there are a lot of stairs, and the stairs are very good for the young elderly. Not when you're very old, because I don't want to suggest that they should also work with the stairs, but the younger elderly, like 65 and so on, if they have been doing this, like in Hong Kong, people have done over their lives so far, and then they can still do a little bit more. That actually will increase their body strength and so on. And in fact, recently, one of my PhD students actually have done a paper with me on this topic. We used the UK Biobank data to look at it. And there's one warning in this, I think everyone will heed. I think this is actually coming out quite soon, this paper, so I'm allowed to say it. So basically, just like any good policy, usually the middle class, that more affluent groups of people in society, they take heed and then they do it. The issue is that the people who are more challenged in economic circumstances, they tend not to do this very well. So the walking and cycling policy itself needs to act with other policies so that actually people will get to do it together. And so that is the important thing. And within the UK Biobank data, you can see that there's a very clear association, which we use some kind of a causal inference methods to show that there are these causal causes, or we can trace back to those. And then for the people who are in more complex life situations, this is unclear. And that is the important part. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Professor Jing, for this very inspiring talk and for this very big and important topic. So I have two questions. The first one is actually on this backdrop.
Yeah.
So actually, that is a lot of intention, including our actually I'm coming from the Research Institute for Smart Aging and also Department of Biomedical Engineering. So how about technology? I'm not sure in UK there's a lot of discussion about how technology can help elderly, as you mentioned, physically change, cultural change. I'm not sure whether people discussing about cultural change, including this technology as well, because it's inevitable. We are getting older and older. And a related thing definitely is whether there's really a silver economy, because when we're talking about the aging and technology, all these comings, whether there's really an opportunity. So can you actually share with us some insight on this? There's a second question I may mention a bit later. That's a bit bigger, actually, as you mentioned, that the Southeast, some countries actually aging fast, but actually they have not been developed yet. So I will come that a bit late, but can we have your insight for the first question about technology first?
Yeah, and you are our hope, because we all want to become bionic, right? And so certainly technology can happen this way. The UK has a particular drawback because in among the old people in the UK, it's cool to show that one doesn't understand technology. So, and if one shows that they actually knows everything, then somehow this is strange. And this is going to change now with the, I'm not so worried about those, because if they cannot learn new tricks like old dogs, then so be that. But the younger generation are very engaged. And well, actually some older people like the late Prince Philip, actually very, very keen. And when I talked to him, actually, he talked a lot about those questions. In fact, he himself actually opened the Cambridge's engineering department himself in the younger age. Yeah, and I would think that technology can do a lot. But that will need to be a part of the whole revolution of governance and also the intergenerational relationships. For example, one thing I always ask my students actually to do in our architectural studios, because I have two tribuses now actually looking at different designs, including one which is about technological design, is really to see how intergenerationally this kind of technology can be transferred from the younger generation to the older generation. So both benefits actually. So not only the older generation gets respect, the younger one also gets the one, right? So, and this will, for example, be our hope to improve our productivity in the 2040s and 2050s, because by then the overall population age will be much older than today. There will be a third who are now over 65. And if you can enable them to do more, you're like to just to have increased your workforce. So this is actually something that I would very much look forward to talking to you more. And your second question?
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, actually, this is really great. So using their brain, because their physical part probably may be vulnerable. So if we can have some way to replace them and using their brain, so be
actually,
more productive.
If my legs are now having problems, if you could give me new legs, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, thank you. The second one, actually, we actually are going to organize a symposium actually in Netherlands in July in an international conference about aging.
Yeah.
That is, the topic is that aging before getting rich.
That's right.
Yeah, so this is some country that for something like UK that already rich, then getting old, okay, or aging, and Japan like this, Korea like this. But there's some country, as you actually in your final summary slide already point out in the Southeast region, some countries not rich enough, but already getting old, okay, adding aging. So can we have some insight about that part? Maybe the challenge will be even more in those kind of countries.
Yes, and this is where technology will play an even greater role, because in those countries, generally there's a more acceptance of developing technologies and less resistance. Of course, all of these needs the proper governance actually to make sure that everything is done in the way that is inclusive and also sustainable. And the Netherlands actually has a lot of connections with the Southeastern countries, because some of the former colonies, they still keep a great relationship, really very much. And also they have developed a lot of elderly care, which is really interesting, fascinating. And I actually sent two of my master students to study them, because one of them was a kind of a ritual kind of elderly home. And talking about the earlier question, just your first question. And basically, what they do is they buy from second-hand shops the kind of furniture in the 70s and put the kind of long play records on that. And so hoping that the older people actually will like them more. Some actually really get to really like these things, but actually it all turned out in the end actually the elderly actually is more technologically advanced than we thought. Actually, people. This is actually where those homes actually get into an issue, because some people actually will not want this kind of old-looking stuff, which they threw out themselves already, but others actually like it. When the issue is to do with poor people getting old, then I would think that we would need perhaps to think how we could adapt the kind of advanced technologies actually to help them. and help them from now. And I think in some of those countries in Southeast Asia is happening just like in Korea.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Professor Jin, I'm very interested in what you mentioned on innovation of governance. I think that this is a key issue for aging.
Yeah.
Because I think the current all of aging research is assumed that aged people is classified into a different sector, different industry sector. So the assumption is that they are not in the normal society, not participating the society anymore, but another sector to be looked after and take care of. But I mean, we need to ask how old is too old, and what is the age threshold to be classified into a different sector, right? Because as in Australia, there's people over 100 years old still being a full-time professor.
Yeah.
And in America, in America, you cannot mandate a retirement age, right? And in UK, as I know, in the UK, as I know, the professor's retirement was about 70 years old. Or otherwise, if they don't want to retire, you cannot force them to retire, right? So all these people are still active in the normal society. I mean, what is the impact of this aging society on our governance regime? I think if we have more aged people still active in society, that would mean the society have more people have autonomous thinking, have more people have their own authority, and then the society will be more decentralized, more polycentric.
Yes.
Then it is a challenge for governance regime. And how can we manage this? So many people, polycentric, have their own autonomous thinking. And I think China's society, as in China, 60 is nearly a mandate retirement age, right? Over 60, you are classified into a different sector. So, I mean, but China's family structure, family as the core unit of society, provide vacancy, a position for these many people's need of authority, right? They have a nuclear organization to exercise their society. But I think in Western countries, this probably not at that structure.
It's not as a typical. Yeah, well, there's several layers of this question. So, but it's a really important question. The first thing I would say is that in terms of categories, that is a concept before AI, particularly if it's classified by age, right? How we're going to do this once we have AI, which can identify a lot of latent groups, is something is still at the research stage, even for AI. And later, if this can or cannot be applied for real government use, that's going to be even harder. But I would say that there are some good examples and bad ones. And first, some bad ones. In the UK, university professors generally do not have a retirement age anymore. What they have is an annual difficult conversation with the head of department. Basically, the head of department will find ways both to threaten and also to give carrots to get them to retire. But actually, it's against the law. And the only 3 exceptions so far I know in the UK are Cambridge, Oxford, and St. Andrews, where there is still a retirement age, and then the university don't have to have a conversation. They just actually clear your office at 69 for Cambridge, if you want to know. And this is still being discussed, of course. And but there are good universities in the US, and there are some examples I've seen, and I've been looking at this because I'm also involved in the university level, talking about some of these things in the kind of panels and so on. In the US, there is also now a category called the professor post-tenure. And basically, when they moved into this category, they are really like gods, but actually they don't have the power or the occupancy of the valuable positions. So the tenured track people can move on to these. And these people, if they want to do 60%, they can do it. If they do 50% or maybe a third, they can do that too. And then basically, they have to show that they're making a contribution. And at the time that when they are no longer doing that, maybe post 100 or whatever, like Australia, then they be sensible and just go. And I think here the question is really to do with how sensibly this culture can change, so that older people can actually participate, but in a way that is workable with the government structures. And I think that one will be a cultural change that is very much this part. It's already happening. And in the US, if you look at, I have one picture which I weeded out because it's too long already. Basically, if you look at the labor participation rates, people in the United States in the 65, 70s, it's already, the tail is already raising itself, because some people have to work and some people like to work. And those, like one of my former GP who just said, I must retire, I don't really want to work, and they say, that'll be fine. And so basically, AI will understand this diversity better, and we should use that. Thank you. Oh, there's one there, yeah. Yeah.
Thank you for your talk, Professor Jin. It's very useful, at least for me, because I'm already retired. Okay, so it's
welcome. You're still here, so that's a
I'm still here. Yeah. That means I'm retired but still active.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is what actually I would very much advocate. Yeah.
Exactly, and I think the measurement of longevity. I just want to confirm with you if there is something new developing in this direction, because using age to measure longevity is like using GDP to measure the contribution of economics or of the economy to the society, because high GDP does not necessarily mean they're good GDPs.
Sure.
Okay, yeah. It's like age without health. Age means nothing.
That's right.
So I'm not sure if there is any new development in having a healthy longevity index. That combines age with health. Like I'm 60, but I'm perfectly mobile. I can run better than many young people. I don't have any prolonged or chronic health problems. So this age, should it be not 60, but something like 40 or 50? All right, and so on and so forth. Many old people, I still believe they are very healthy and active, although not many young people. Some young people, they are not healthy. So a healthy age index or longevity index may mean more to the society and academics like you, rather than just an age pyramid like this.
Sure.
Like you have presented. So I'm wondering if there is any development or thinking in developing such an index.
And this is in process. For example, the UK Biobank data, which actually has a global access, and one should look at, because these are the 500,000 medical records of people who contributed into this. And the idea we've seen so far is that it's hugely diverse, right? And my mentor in Cambridge is now over 80. And I when I write the card when he was 80, I said, dear Marcel, 80 is like 60. In fact, it's probably more like a 55 for him, right? And my mentor in Beijing, who's now this year 104, right? And I said, aim at 120, right? So actually, you could just go on, absolutely, the quality of time is important, but the quality of time is to do with technology, with medical services, and also with the interaction with young people. And one really important thing which Carl Jung said, and Carl Jung actually wrote a lot of books about dreams, and I suggest that you don't read them, because actually they're very imaginative, but actually there's no scientific backing to that. But when he was old, there was a BBC reporter who went to his home on the Geneva Lake and asked him, how do you cope with this old age? And he said, don't think so much about yourself, and melt your life in younger people's lives. And he then gave examples of his son, the sons and daughters, and also the grandchildren. And they said that they are very naughty. They steal my hats, but actually I interact with them. So once you build this kind of network, particularly intergenerationally, ideally with 2 or more generations, then life becomes much better. And one thing which you can confirm is that whether medically one is healthy or not, globally there's always this U curve. People are very happy when they're young. And then in the middle age, I'm looking at a lot of middle-aged people, and they tend actually to dip a little because the pressures. And then in the older age, this rises. Currently, the younger part, actually the head actually dipped a little bit. At the moment, there's a lot of pressures, but the older one actually is just as strong. And I think really we should encourage that, engage with that, and facilitate that. Thank you.
Okay, we will accommodate 2 more questions.
Okay, can I just supplement a little bit, because this is so relevant to the audience? I can say how can I say, active retired person or active senior. So because you really look too young. So the reason is because we actually are organizing our 2nd symposium on happy aging. Okay, so that happy is very special. After working on our smart aging for almost 10 years, we figure out only have smart is not enough. We must have some real meaning for this. So I have a lot of discussion among colleagues, and we finally figured out last year, and this is why we have the first symposium last year about happy. And the first term of happy, H is health, okay, healthy.
Yeah.
And these are all the terms actually so interesting people are using in all different areas. The second, A, is active, so just like today, okay. The P is positive, so people are talking about positive aging. And the next P is prepared, no matter physical, dollar, whatever, prepared. And last I is independent. So that is the only one that during the last symposium, a lot of people discuss. Too independent is not good enough. This is why, as actually President just mentioned, we need to communicate with young people. This is why we come out independent and interdependent, meaning that you need to actually work with others. So finally, we have this abbreviation called HAPPY, and we think make people happy, and happy aging is really the ultimate goal, but with the meaning of healthy, active, positive, prepared, and independent. So I just want to supplement. So that symposium in December 3 and 4th in Hotel Icon. So if any of you can remember this day, welcome to join us. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Well, sadly, that is the date, because otherwise I would very much like to join, but that was the the examination period, so I probably wouldn't be able to, but if there's an online option, I very much would like to participate in some way. And it's a great term that you have coined. And I would say that when looking at the preparedness, it's not only at the personal level, this need to be prepared, but also particularly at the city level, because older people shouldn't live like hermits. It's very bad for their health, mostly. They should be actually in the middle of all action, just like our great model here, to be interacting with all of this, to have the independence and interdependence. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any last questions from the audience? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Professor Chen.
That's a fascinating topic. When I look at the title of the speech, and I'm more thinking, wow, it's going to be a lot of talk about spatial implication. I think you allude to one, which is concentration. People started to migrate and or concentrate into London, which is understandable because it's resources, hospital, education, and so on. I saw one of the forecasts on the future population growth. By end of the century,
Yeah.
India is going to be number one, 1.5 billion.
Yeah.
China actually going to be shrinking. It's going to be down to something like a third of that. And then you have like your line on the first chart, Nigeria, Pakistan, and so on. So in fact, contrary to the longevity, people living longer, people is going to be less and less, fewer. And that, I think, is another big, at least prominent forces, if not the most important, that's going to have implication on the future of the cities. And you can look at it in many ways, spatial, economics, financial, and so on. So I was wondering what would be your, especially for China,
Yeah.
how's that going to play out in terms of your, say, what it means for the future of the city?
Yes, and a really a good question and very, very important. And I weeded out all the spatial implications because the lecture simply is not long enough. You need to have more than probably a whole series of conferences actually to deal with this. In fact, there's several series of conferences in doing it. So I thought that we should focus on the things that are currently the most missing. And the one thing I want to say is that the population is like a big juggernaut and a kind of oil tanker, very difficult to turn around. So if it's set in one direction or the other, India, of course, has got the population, but also have a lot of people who are not currently employed in the villages. So that is a very sort of important consideration for the policymakers there. And the issue I want to emphasize is that just like you mentioned, the earlier point about density, and the work that I did in the World Bank in Guangdong, in the Greater Bay Area, including Hong Kong, actually some data we saw is that if you expand your access to people, double the amount of access to people in the area, you improve your productivity by 14%. And this is because not only you can get more people to help you, but also you get inspired. And access doesn't need to be actually in your family or in your friend network or in your WeChat network and so on. And it could just be in this audience, actually over here, for example, Professor Zheng saying there's a conference and you go to it, and that leads to many things. And so on average is 14%. And then for the people who are skilled, this can be much more. And so I would say that since you cannot really help with the increase or the reduction of population in the global amounts, and that's something that is simply no policymakers should ever dare actually to do it because it's just not enough influence, right? Hungary, for a while in the 2000s, spent 6% of the GDP to encourage people to give birth. And I met the ambassador recently, and I thought it was 5%. He said it was 6%. That's okay, 6%. 6% GDP is more than what the people are prepared to spend in defense, right? Double amount or more in Europe. And he said that not only they did all the obvious things like nurseries, schools, and kind of maternity leave for both parents and stuff like that. And they even went down to the details like offering multiple person vehicles actually for large families. The result, it went up a little, and now actually after more than a decade, you could see that the people who wanted to have children, they kind of had children earlier because they could get this money. And after that, there was a dip, and at the moment is no better than other Eastern European countries. And however, what you could do is that through both physical access to people like this conference, and also through technological means online with all the people who are listening to this talk, for example, and also through your social media education to get more access to people. And with that, and if you can get AI to help to filter the information so you get the communication more effective, then I think the game is on.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I think the discussion is very lovely. Now, to appreciate the speaker, we prepare a souvenir for you. Yeah, this is a souvenir with your name and lecture title. I also like to invite Professor Zhang, Dr. Chen, Professor Neil, and Professor Yang to come to the stage, take a photo together. Thank you very much, and thank everyone for coming to this seminar. It's adjourned. Thank you.